Righto, thanks, Ray. Well, I thought I'd just break this presentation down into sort of four pieces, really. I suppose a bit about family, where I've come from, I suppose my involvement in sport, how I got involved into this industry, which we all, I think are really proud of and really love, and also the things that I've tried to give back to the industry, by being involved in many different aspects of it. So I was actually born in London. My mother was a Kiwi, Dad was English, and so I was actually born over there. So I'm part Pom, and I'm also part Maori. So I'm sort of got a foot in both camps. Mum was at dental college over in the UK. She was studying to be a dentist. Her father had told her that she needed to get on and further her career, and so she went and studied dental. Was a dental nurse in New Zealand, and then went on to try and study dentistry. I'm not certain what happened after I was born over there, but obviously it gave them a hell of a shock because Mum and Dad separated before I was 2, so Mum was on a boat and came back to New Zealand. And we sort of settled back and lived with my grandparents in a small town called Taniatua. So huge population, as you can see. They had the sign at the street when I was growing up. Population cracked 1,000, and it's actually sort of shrunk back and got smaller and smaller and smaller these days. So it's a little provincial town. So a bit of a quick question for someone. Does anyone know where it is? Apart from some people in the room. Anyone got a clue? These Aucklanders? Near Morrinsville. Bloody hell. No one else? God, well, it's actually pretty close to where we're going to be this afternoon. So, Danny, you can have the Booper Prize for not being close. It's actually in the Eastern Bay of Plenty. I haven't got a pointer there, but it's out to the right of your screen there. It's about, I think, 30 or 40 k's from the mill we're going to see this afternoon, and obviously Rotorua's to the left there. So we returned there and lived with my grandparents there. We'd actually owned the Taniatua Hotel. So my grandfather was the publican there for about 22 years. And I sort of grew up, and he was sort of my dad, I suppose, as you saw. And in those days, there was a 6 o'clock swill at the hotels. All the pubs closed at 6 o'clock. And he gave me this job and let me rip into the pub after everyone had got out. And I used to scavenge around the floor and pick up all the pocket money, the money that guys had spilled out of their pockets while paying for their drinks. It was quite a profitable exercise as a little wee kid. I was only about 4, 5, 6 at this stage, but I was only allowed to keep half of that money. He used to grab the other money off and throw it in a bank account for me, try to teach me to save some money. And as a matter of principle, I've actually kept all that money tucked away in a little bonus bond fund for the last 50 odd years, and it's still sitting there untouched, so one day we might crack into it. If I go through just a few milestones after that, we sort of shifted up to Rotorua, lived here for a year, and then basically moved on to Hamilton, which was really home for 31 years. And I suppose my grandfather really instilled a lot of values in me around helping others, getting involved and working hard, so tried to instill a pretty good work ethic in me as a young kid. He always used to say you were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth and use them in the right proportion. And he used to give me a clip around the ears, obviously, when I didn't. I became involved in sport, I suppose, as most of us do, growing through. I actually picked up badminton as was my main sport, mainly because I never grew up to be too big to play rugby, and I actually got knocked out in a game and never went back to it. I got flattened by some guys who were about 3 times the size of me. So I sort of picked up badminton and became involved in lots of areas, and got involved in administration of the sport, leading clubs, and involved in some of the coaching, training, and also some umpiring. So, and I actually returned to play at rep level, believe it or not, last year, some 30 years after sort of first starting. And my teammates last year were about 30 years younger than me, so they had a lot of carrying to do. And I certainly knew that I'd been back playing the next morning because I could hardly move. So this year I've just gone back to playing social badminton. So the grey hair or lack of it, most probably you actually do pick up a few clues along the way in life. But it's been a great sport, and it's really good to get involved in those sorts of things. During sort of my time with badminton, we had a great club member, a guy called Doug Holmes, and he gave our club, the Te Rapa Badminton Club, $100,000. He had a dream to build a new facility in Hamilton, but he was a farmer, he was rough around the edges, and he couldn't quite deal with the councils, the protocols and the fundraising. It was just too hard, so he just said, give us this money, just go and make it happen. So two of us got involved, myself and a guy called Craig Yarnley, and I got my wife Linda, who's an architectural draftsman, to do some design concepts, and we actually built this facility in Hamilton. It cost us about 1.5 million, and two of us raised 1.4 million using Doug's 100k of seed money to get this thing established. It was quite innovative in its time. It had a rubber mat sports floor which was poured over concrete. It was like a liquid rubber matting, and it's used quite widely now across the country. The sad thing was that Doug, who gave us the seed money, never saw this thing completed. He died 6 months before we'd finished it, so the steel work was up. He was a really avid rugby player. He was watching the All Blacks play in South Africa for the World Cup. And he died in his chair watching the game when the All Blacks were ahead 12-9, so at least he passed away really happy, but sadly he never saw his dream fulfilled. So that was quite a sad thing for him. So obviously the project was huge for us, and it was really interesting to try and use all the skills you'd developed in life to try and pull these sorts of things together. For my sins, I suppose, I've currently been sucked into a project in Tauranga, where I live, to build another facility like this in association with the Bay of Plenty Polytechnic. And this is likely to be around a $6 to $12 million project. So we've finished all the concept drawings at this stage, and we're just starting to sort of think about management and obviously funding, which is the next steps. I'm only going to go through to the sort of finishing all the concept drawings and the outlines of the fundraising, and I'll leave it to them, because I said I've had enough of raising money like this. It's really hard work, and I just haven't got time. On a lighter note, also enjoy recreation as a bit of fishing. Sometimes we catch some fish, sometimes it's just great sitting out the water and relaxing. It's a really great part of life. I live in Tauranga over the Bay of Plenty, and we've got water right at our doorstep. We've got a boat ramp 5 minutes from our house, so it's just great to just throw the boat in, go out for a quick fish in the evening. Also enjoy travel, and I think Guy Denny is going to give us a bit of a clip, if he's awake. So I don't know if you can hear all that, but basically, Linda and I do enjoy a fair bit of travel, and we send a message home to our children that we're having a great time without them, and we're trying to spend as much of their inheritance as we could. And so I aim to sort of try and keep that going up. We do have 3 children, 27, 25, 23, and 1 granddaughter. So I suppose, how do I get involved in this industry? And it's an industry that I really love and pretty passionate about, and while it's a lot of hard work, you can have lots of fun. So I was at university in Hamilton, and got halfway through a degree in business management. It was a fairly new course, and there was a vacancy advertised in the Waikato Times, December 78, by I&L, Independent Newspapers, which was obviously the forerunner to what is now Fairfax. And I started there as a management advertising cadet in January 79. So I got the job and started off there. If I didn't get it, I would have gone back to university. $87 a week, I found my payslip when preparing this thing. So even though it wasn't quite in this age here, the industry was really in a state of transition at the time. And I suppose if you have a look, to join the industry at this time was quite interesting for a young fella. Cold type was just being introduced to the Waikato Times. They just moved out to the new building at Foreman Road, which was called Moonbase. And obviously in actually, I think 2 weeks, just moving out of it back into town, as obviously it's all been largely decommissioned. Staff tensions were also pretty high. Industrial action was common at the paper, along with I think it was the change that was going on. The change was embraced by many, but there was a strong pushback by others, and work to rule was norm for the period. And I suppose I found that difficult coming through my upbringing. When you're asked to do a job, you went and did it. But in this sort of environment, people went so far, and you can't touch this, and you couldn't do that. So it was an interesting period. It was really quite good. So again, a lot of background, and again on 20th September, it was interesting in my first year, there was actually a national strike in New Zealand. It was actually my 21st birthday, so what a great day to get a day off. It was really good. So anyone's done any maths? Can anyone work out how old I am? If I looked at that last slide. Oh, who was that? So yeah, not too bad. So the cadetship program, what did it involve? It was really 4 years working in various departments of the newspaper, all departments. It was a robust program. It was a pretty engaged program. It covered sales, accounting, editorial, the whole lot. And the main focus was really on sales and marketing. And part of that, we had to complete courses in advertising, block courses, and also University of Auckland courses in management. There are a selected group of people chosen to go through this process, and I think Chris Yagish, who's currently the regional manager for NZME, and I are most probably the only two who went through the program who are still actually involved in the industry. So we sort of, wandered around after one another. There might be a couple of others out there from Wellington. So what it really deliver? I suppose it kept you on your toes for that 4-year period, because there was no guarantee of a job at the end of it. You had to work pretty hard, and then obviously, hopefully, there was a vacancy that popped up. We kept on learning all the time with the processes. It was really good. And there were some interesting characters you met along the way. One that I'd recount, I think Bob Anderson is in the room somewhere, maybe not. We had a credit control manager, a guy called Jim Riley, who should have been an undertaker. He was about 6'6", and he walked around with this stoop all day. And when he talked to you, he always looked at the ceiling for some reason. So being a silly young kid that I was at the time, when he was talking to me looking up at the roof, I decided to jump on the chair in his office so he could get a better view of me. And he bellowed so hard that I fell through the bottom of the chair, went over the back and put my head through his door. So there's some interesting stories that you can learn along the way, and there's some interesting people. I also went over and did country branch experience. So Thames Star, Hauraki Herald at the time, and Piako Post and Morrinsville. So you actually got seconded out to the regions. And you're also used as a relieving manager in the departments when some of the senior managers were away. So that was a bit interesting, having a young kid trying to run a department and try and change the world. But it did provide great experience. It was how to learn, how to manage staff. It was really interesting on taking all this background. Interesting, one of the first sales campaigns I did, if you like, Sales 101, when I was let loose, was to go out and I did a branding campaign for this camera shop called Snapshot. And I thought, well, I've come with all the answers. I did a nice presentation and did all the things we should do. So it had a bit of frequency. It was across multiple editions. And I've just sort of recreated it. Is there anything on the screen? Yep. So, so it was actually, they had the address, and it was a branding campaign, Snapshot, and we were going to put it across the paper, so you can see it scattered across the paper there on the left and right over the pages, and it was going to run for a week, so it was really good. And I expected a great call from the guy, Maury Boswell, who was the owner, complimenting me on how great it looked in the paper, but I got a phone call, which was maybe not quite flattering. The compositors decided to have a bit of fun. And instead of being a snapshot, they changed it to snapshot. And so this was scattered 12 times through the paper. It wasn't very happy, and there were a lot of compositors in the building having a great joke. They thought it was really hilarious. And interestingly, just researching this thing last week, the business is still going. And that guy on the left is the guy Maury's son and grandson still involved in the business. So hopefully that proves that my campaign actually did work. I didn't cripple his business long term. So career progression, it's really been in 3 groups. The top blue to 2000 was with INL. The darker bit from 2000 to 2011 was with APN, or Wilson Horton, and then APN, and then 2011 obviously with the Beacon Media Group. So I really got involved in this industry, I suppose, as far as the commercial side and the printing side, was when I was down in Taupo, because Taupo had like many newspapers, had a commercial print division out the back, and I was given the task to try and tidy it up and get it working a little wee bit better. I think at this stage I'd sort of started to get a bit of a reputation as a bit of a fix-it person and to try and get lorry projects going, so we had to take the taupo times up to 4 days a week, and we did a bit of work in the commercial, and then we got that established, and then Peter Henson, who was the GM I reported to, said we had a problem in Hamilton, and would I come back there and have a look at the commercial operation there. And that involved sort of getting in and analysing the business, and then I was appointed manager. And at that time I got involved with the industry organisations such as the Printing Industries Association of Auckland, along with working. And then obviously the roles you can see there just led me through the two different groups, and then I got approached by APN, Martin Simons at the time, to go and take over as GM of the Bay of Plenty Times in Tauranga. And that was an unusual sort of an interview process. I didn't realise there was a vacancy until he phoned me up. I was at the Waikato Times and said, listen, I'd like to talk to you about this. And I said, well, that's okay. Do you want to arrange an interview time? And he said, well, no, I'll come down and see you. So he came down home in Hamilton, and typical Māori style, had this big pile of papers, and we sat at our dining table. And I sort of used the old real estate trick. I said to Linda, put some baking on with some muffins to make it smell good and warm. And so we sat there and had something to eat. And Marty came with all the weekly accounts for the Bay of Plenty Time and Print Corp and said, have a look at these. Can you fix this business? And I'm sort of looking at numbers and thinking, what the hell's all this going on? So sort of went through and marked it up and made some comments and bits and pieces, and he made the sort of noises. And after about 4.5 hours, away he went off back to Auckland. And then a couple of weeks later, he just said he wanted me to join, and that's how I sort of ended up over in Tauranga. And obviously there's a lot of project work going at APN, a lot of change that was going on through the group at the time with the ownership structures from Wilson Horton to APN, etc. And I sort of got sucked in there to doing a quite fair bit of project work outside the normal stuff. So, and it was interesting, it was really good, it was great times. I left there in 2011 when they wanted me to shift up to Auckland, and I just said I'm not going. I think there was too much for me, too much turmoil in the corporate world, and there was no real benefit for me. So I decided to take the redundancy that was offered and go and paint the house for a couple of months, which was great. And then similar sort of conversation, John Spring phoned me up after that one. That's how we ended up working at the Beacon Group ever since. So if we have a look at it, currently I'm CEO of the Beacon Media Group, and we've got 8 companies out there. And it's been a really busy 4 years with this group as well. We've redeveloped, I think moved all of our commercial printing operations into new premises. We've obviously built the new site at Hastings, which is in partnership with, obviously developed on the back of APN NZME with their contract printing. And it's been full on. So the site down there is a 6-tower community press, a couple of folders and a couple of inserting lines, and it's pretty busy, and it's run by Scott Povey, who you saw get up last night and grab some awards. So along the way, I've tried to give back to the industry and keen to sort of get involved, and there's a few details there of what I've been doing along the way. And while that sport's also been important, it's important to give back to the industry, I think, that we all love. So I've sort of got involved for a long, long time. And way back in about 98, we had to really have a good look at the Printing Z model, which was a big 18-person board. It was cumbersome, so myself and a couple of others got involved and decided that we needed to re-engineer Printing Z basically to the model it is today, and obviously Dan's leading that under a slightly different structure as Competence has been involved in taking over the training arm. But it was a big job, but it was really, I think, rewarding, and I think it set up the industry organisation for what it is today. We looked, again, then 10 years ahead and tried to sort of crystal ball what the industry would be like, focused really hard on the training side of things, and it was really good. So it's a tough job, but it's the sort of things I think you need to get involved in. Currently, I'm just sort of sitting on that management advisory group, which is a pretty easy job, but I'm also president of the Community Newspapers Association, which is 78 publications strong and actually going pretty well. And these are mainly the independent, or are all the independent operators that are out there. Also, as we heard yesterday with some of the apprentices, I was lucky to get a few awards along the way to recognise contribution to the industry. Was actually travel then, like the apprentice ones last night. $5,000 worth of travel way back in about '94 to go and travel over in Australia, and it was really good to go and use that time to go and look at sites, see what people were doing, and come back with some really good ideas. And obviously the best ideas you learn it from the coalface. Obviously at the Waikato Times there's also plenty of fun. So we had a cricket team out there, and I don't know if we can see in the middle there, but there's a Bob Anderson stuck in the middle there, and you can see our shield there was actually a toilet seat, the Ways Goose shield, which was a real tough trophy. So if you can pick Bob as third from the right in the middle there. I think there's even a Bruce Ritchie there who spent some time up at APN at the Herald. I was also involved in the early stages when John North had a look at the Pride and Print campaign. So with Sue and way back then was really the start of the Pride and Print Awards. And John went over to Chicago, I think, and had a look at the American Awards over there and brought that concept back to New Zealand. It was quite novel at the time, and I think the awards have grown from strength to strength, which was it's been superb to see that growth. I was recognised, obviously, from the Print NZ point of view for the contribution in 2008 and awarded life membership to that organisation. And in 2008 also, Dave McIntyre's down the back there writing was, brought in to publish Ink in Our Veins, which was a book which talked about 100 years of the Printing Industries Federation and an organisation, and to celebrate that in quite a formal way. So it's a book of I think it might be a couple of hundred pages, Dave, which he went around and compiled a lot of it and interviewed those of us who are still alive in the industry. And it was a really good job, but I was a bit perplexed when I flicked to a page that he'd co-published and put there about myself. And he's labelled me as Sir Avery, Dave, but this book came out, it's got Rebel with a Cause, so I'm not quite certain what that meant, Dave. I must catch up to you a bit later and talk to that one. But it's a great read. I'm sure Printing NZ, Ruth, will have copies of that thing still available. When you look on the way, there are people that you can look up to and your mentors as you go through your careers, and I've sort of just quickly covered 3 or 4 here for you to have a bit of a look at. One was Mike Robson, who was Managing Director of INL. He really oversaw a large expansion of INL and the acquisition of the papers and Sky TV at the time. And he'd always have time to come around to the sites and talk to you one-on-one and give you lots of good advice. He was a pretty dry sort of a character, but he's really great. And he really introduced, all the pushed ahead with the introduction of offset presses across the INL group at the time, and obviously the introduction of computer technology. And he had a fair few battles. He used to arrive at the premises normally to talk to us, and he all had mismatched shirts of checks and colours and things because he was completely colourblind. And I think in one of the race meetings he came wearing a pink hat because he thought it was brown. So he's a real gentleman, but he was a great guy. He passed away sadly too soon at the age of 61. So after going for a run. It's gone to sleep. Yep. And he used to flick notes out to everyone. So he was, this is just a note from me, but he'd flick these notes out to a lot of people in the company all the time just to try and keep in touch. So this is before email days. So, and he'd always sort of do that, and I've got a few of those. Another mentor was Peter Henson, who was mainly the GM I worked for at Waikato Times for a number of years. Big guy, full of personality, knew how to spend large, which was much to the accountants, I think, were cringing at the expenditure that was going on. But he was a marketeer extraordinaire. And I think Waikato Times today would still be the most highly branded newspaper in any market when you drive through a city, and it's really largely down to him. He didn't worry about the small details, and he actually let us just get on with it. But he had some interesting styles, and 17 years of sort of working in and directly for him at different areas. We never had a management meeting, not one. No management meetings. We just used to have a morning tea where he'd put on the scones and things like that. So there was never a management meeting in 17 years that I was there. He was very much a community man. He became involved in numerous sports clubs and arts things and hospice and racing and brass bands, partly using obviously the clout of the paper, but it was actually to build the profile of the paper, but he actually got involved personally. He passed away early this year, but he always was a great guy, always had a glint in his eye and a real zest for life. Another one was Joan Grace. As I mentioned earlier, I appointed Joan to the role about 2001 as the head of Print NZ, and I got a lot of flack from the industry. What are you doing appointing a woman into this role? This is a man's job. And actually my answer back was she was the best person for the job. She brought in a really a level, I suppose, of skill that we hadn't seen before. We needed someone to try and dissect through the changes that were going on in the industry. She was very strong at the industry training, so she brought together the training side and the employer side of the body and led a change into a single entity. She did a fantastic job for the industry. And what she didn't know, she'd go and find out about. And she was really good, to be able to have that analytical view. She left the industry left New Zealand in 2013, and Ruth Cobb, who I worked with for a long time, took over. Another one was Martin Simons, who I said I worked for him for 11 years. We had lots of disagreements and stuff at the time, but he had a really challenging role to play in managing the change of ownership of Wilson Horton, APN, and the ownership battles that were going on, and was under huge pressure, for a lot of the time. But he was a passionate newspaper person, ex-journalist, great to have some serious debate with. You didn't always agree with him, but he was a real straight shooter, and I don't think I've seen anyone put on the number of hours that anyone would ever see. He was just a bit of a machine working day or night, so he had huge pressure on him. But so he was great to also have as a mentor. I suppose just to conclude with a couple of things, funny things that happen along the way in your career. So this was about 1996, and this is the days of the cold type, where you used to get type out in galleys. And Ivan Peace was a well-known city councillor in Hamilton, and I was, production and operations manager at the time. And all these death notices would come out in galleys, and it'd often be put a note from the compositor, a little note at the bottom, this is the last death notice for the day, so guys, paste it up on the page and stick it on. Well, it's talk about process and getting things right. When you have a different person on the shift, there was a little note that stuck on the bottom, what was meant to be for the compositor, but we printed just about half the edition of the death notice, and down the bottom it had, that's all folks signed Bugs Bunny. So I was out at the press and horrified at this, and of course the papers had all gone. So quickly phoning up his widow and humbly apologising, and she saw the funny side of it, but at the time I didn't. And obviously it takes two to make all these things happen and get all these opportunities. So Linda's been pretty supportive of me, and she keeps the household pretty well organised and always has. The Beacon is, I suppose, put up some interesting challenges as well. We have some crazy dress-up themes and parties, and the admin team a couple of years ago, which is basically John and myself, we got the letter U to go to the Christmas party, so you had to dress up in the letter U. So Linda dressed up as an umbrella, and I sort of thought, well, I'd go upside down. So for those young fellows who don't think managers talk out of their wherever ends of their body, here's living proof that we do. Thanks very much.